I was introduced to this club back when I was about 18 or 19 years old, and I was working for my father in the summers. I was in college, and he was a member. And if I would get up early enough on Tuesday and put on street clothes rather than working clothes, he wouldn't send me out on the trucks to do stuff. So I would go to Rotary. But anyhow, Tommy Potts still here. It, I remember, let's see, if Tommy's still here, I think he will appreciate this. Tommy, you're here. Okay. I went with my father one summer day. I guess it must have been at the end of July or whenever the changing of the guard is. And the club had somewhat fallen into disarray and was not doing very well. And they elected Tom Potts to be president. And I remember going up there and hearing his speech. And Tom was a good friend of mine. He's a much older gentleman, but anyhow, he and his wife were both good friends of mine. And I had talked to someone later and told them about Tom Potts' speech at the Rotary Club when he was taking over as president. And they insisted that I come and do that for the club. I was about 18 years old and I was scared to death, but anyhow. But we came in there and Tom got up to the microphone, and I can't remember all of it. But he said, "We're going to start a new day today here at the Rotary Club. This ain't gonna be no luncheon club. This is gonna be a service club. We gonna come in here at 12 o'clock and we gonna eat. And you people that get up when the speaker is speaking before they finish, that's rude. We ain't gonna have that. That's rude." And anyway, so that became a byword for the club anytime anybody left. But anyhow, most of our remembrances are around people who are no longer vertical. But had a great impression on me. One story I've already told you was with Oscar Kilby, who was the typical curmudgeon, elderly fella, very erudite, very well-educated. But we sat there, and somebody introduced somebody, and everybody clapped. And then somebody introduced somebody else, and everybody clapped. And then somebody made the speaker and everybody clapped. And as we got up to pledge allegiance, Oscar looked over to me, and he said, "I've been coming to Rotary for 45 years, and I hadn't clapped yet." So that would tell you a little bit about him. I'll tell you one more. I'm not going to let him hog the thing, but I lived in his house at a time. He and his wife both died within a few months of each other. The house was being taken over by the bank. I needed a place to live at the time, so I got with two trust officers of the bank who were both members of this club, Frank Newell and Jimmy Miggs, and I lived there. And his ties were still on the rack. And this is how much of an individualist this guy was. He would put on a tie and he would tie it. And if one of the ends was too long, he would not retie it. He had a scissors there, and he would cut it off. And he had lots, and it didn't matter if it was the little one or the big one. If the big one was too long, he had plenty of them that he cut off right there. A true story. One of my memorable people will remember this. One of the most memorable things I remember is when Jamie Pruitt was the sergeant at arms, and we were playing a little game at the time where they'd give a resume of somebody, and then ask who it was. And if you guessed it, you got a bottle of wine or a gift certificate or something. Nice little thing we did, right, just took a couple of minutes. And she came up, she said, all right, this fella graduated from Harvard, summa cum laude, in 1954. From there, he went on and he joined the CIA and was an operative in Korea, behind the lines, and won this award and that award, and he came back and he was in the CIA and was sent to this place and that place, and he came back and he went in the investment banking business and he made millions and millions of dollars, And everybody was sitting there thinking, looking around at everybody in this club and says, who in the hell is this? And so she finally got to the crescendo and says, did anybody say who this is? And 3 people guessed, and of course they were wrong. And finally, she said, well, really it's nobody, I just made it up. Which tickled me. Oh, we used to have 3-minute rotary. We used to have singing. We had more singing than just the America the Beautiful, but everyone joined in their own key, and so they finally cut that out. I remember a couple of wonderful characters that were in the club. One of them was Farley Berman, who was the great collector of the weapons in the museum and all that, and you know Farley. Farley was a fabulous guy. And a fellow named Tom Peterson was in the club, who was the head of SuperValu out here. Nicest guy you ever saw. And we were meeting at the Presbyterian Church over here, and evidently Tom had been up to Farley's house the night before and had left his blazer up there. And so we were at the Presbyterian Church, and he came back, and he went by. Farley was sitting at a table, and he went by going into the food line and said, Farley, I really appreciate you bringing my blazer back. And Farley said very loud so everybody everywhere around could hear, he said, well, the reason I brought your blazer back is I don't look good in cheap clothes. I don't know why that stands with me. We had a fella. We had a fella in here named Orville Madison, and poor Orville is not vertical anymore, and I hate to talk about the dead, but he deserves it. No matter how far over the 1 o'clock, and people had meetings, and we'd try to get out of here by 1 o'clock, but at 1:05, as everybody got up, Orville would always say, well, I've got one more question. And he would have a 5-minute question. Well, anyhow, I remember the first woman getting in the club.
Question after a 5-minute dissertation.
Exactly. You're right. You're absolutely right. First woman in the club, as I remember, was Cynthia Wingo, who was a very excellent member. She ran the telephone company around here for quite a while. I remember Harry Mabry, who was one of my favorite people in the world, when he was president. Billy Acker and Susan have adopted many students from the International House and sort of been their parents in residence while they're gone away from wherever they're from. And there was one particular girl that was named Sophie, not Sophie, but Sophie. And Acker became very, very, persistent that everybody said Sophie. And so Harry was introducing the guest, and he says, and this girl was a Belgian girl, French or Belgian, or I don't remember which one. Anyhow, he said, we have Sophie so-and-so, and Acker says, Sophie. And Harry says, we have Sophie, and she is a guest of Mr. Acker. He was quick. He was very quick. I remember Hank Sachs had a string of like 29 years of perfect membership, and he had to slip out early one day, and he was sitting next to my dad. He said, Glenn, will you turn my button in so I'll be sure to get counted? Daddy said, sure. And he put it in his pocket. He totally forgot it. Fortunately, Miriam Coleman, who used to take the thing the next week, he tried to explain to her. She said, don't worry about it, I saw you was here. But anyhow, one of my favorite memories, and this will be my last, we had at the Valentine dinner here at the Country Club one time, we had Vince Dooley's wife talk to us. And she is a tremendous after-dinner speaker, if you have ever heard. I think, is her name Barbara? Yeah. And then Barbara Dooley. Well, she went there, and this was a time when Georgia was #1 in the country, and Vince Dooley was the #1 coach in the world, and all this kind of stuff, and he was so busy with everything that he didn't pay any attention to her. He'd come in the afternoon, put the films on the television, sit there watching them, eat dinner right there in front of the television, watching more films and everything. And finally, she had just about had enough of this. And he was sitting there glued to the football movies on the television. And she said, I went into my bedroom and I took off every stitch of clothes I ever thought about having on and came and jumped between him and the television. She said, Vince, play me or trade me.